You need training on social media, because how else is anyone going to know who you are, what you do, how they can work with you, unless you've got a 30 grand ad spend every month. So social media for me is like the first thing that most people should start, because you want to start building that presence before you go out and look for investors and potential landlords. I have lots of people that I train and they're just not action takers, and they jump from your course to my course to someone else's course and they're still not compliant. I have people that I've been speaking to for 2 years now. They still say, I'm still sorting out my compliance. It's not hard. It really isn't. It's very hard for people to take you seriously when you don't even take yourself seriously.
Hey, Paul, done a £108,000 sourcing fee out of one deal, and that was just on Google Street View. You've got to tell me about that deal.
So we were researching a HMO in an area called Kensington in Liverpool.
Okay. In Kensington, London, I thought that might made a bit more sense, but no, Liverpool, okay.
And we dropped the little yellow man on Google. We were doing a couple of laps around the area, and we came across this piece of land that had a banner, and it had the builder's mobile number on.
Okay.
And we thought, you know what, it's a year and a half old, this Street View, but let's see what comes of it. And we called the developer up, and he was 3 months off of completing a row of 6 houses.
Okay.
And we asked him, was he selling them off plan? And he had attempted with a local agent, but they couldn't sell it without a show house.
Right.
So we approached him and said, look, why don't you give us the 3 months until you complete to see how many, if not all of them, off plan. And if we do well, then we'll sell out the rest of the site for you. And we sold those in 4 weeks.
Wow.
And he was shocked. And straight away he was like, right, I'm going to start the 2 semis and the block of 3 one-bed apartments. And we sold those again. We sold those off plan. And all of a sudden he got the buzz for it. And before you knew it, we went on to do 4 other sites with him. So wow. It was the start of a really good relationship. And that was all just from finding it on Street View. We never did the HMO in Kensington because we forgot about that. But it's one thing that I teach to my mentees is whatever you're doing, always look for what else you can get out of that opportunity.
Yes, always being alert and looking for what else is going on.
Exactly, yeah.
So what did you do differently in that situation that everybody else was making a mess of it, estate agency-wise, that meant that the agents couldn't do the deal and you got that done in a few weeks?
Well, I think with estate agents, they sell on viewings, right? Like every time you call up and ask about a property, the first question is, do you like to book a viewing? And that's obviously not possible on a off-plan site. So I think if they were ready built, they would have no problem selling those. Yeah. But I just don't think their method of marketing and maybe even their base of buyers was the right base. Okay. For us, we're only dealing with buy-to-let investors. They're typically looking for turnkey products. So not only were we able to get them secured quickly, but we were also able to line up tenants to move in on completion as well. So they were then income producing from day one.
So it's really putting together a full package, and it was a case of, right, for the developer, it was right, we'll get them sold in this period of time. You've put together a deal where it's attractive for the investor and you've got the tenants in there as well. So I can see how the fee started to really build up then because what you're doing, the amount of value that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, definitely. And even though that was a big chunk of money, the 108,000, that was over, what did we have, 6 one-beds, 2 semis, so that's 8, and then 3 one-beds, so it's 11 units. So it was just under £10,000 a unit, which our average fee typically is 11,200. So there are bigger fees to make, but obviously doing it as a site, we went for a lower fee, and it was at the start of a relationship with the developer. So it was looking at the bigger picture as well, not always just looking at what's in front of you.
Yes. So take me right back. What got you into sourcing property, and what was the journey into property and now sourcing deals?
Yeah, so I've always been in sales and I've always liked property. But the thing I don't like is the estate agency model, being sat in an office, putting properties on Rightmove, waiting for people to come to you. The filtering process that I see in estate agency is endless. So you put a property up, everyone's alerts go off that there's a new property on the market. They inquire, they They don't read the information on it, so they don't realise it's tenanted. They go and view it and then realise it's tenanted. So that whole model just detracted me from ever wanting to go into a estate agency. And if I cast my mind back like 12 years ago, I'd never heard of property sourcing, and I don't know if it was a big deal back then. You've been in the game longer than I have.
So when I started sourcing 15 years ago.
So it took a while for me to find out the route that I wanted to enter property in, and it was by chance. I was training salespeople up, and there was a company that was looking for a sales trainer for a team of 8 property sourcers. The more I learned about what they were doing, the more I thought, you know what, this is something I could see myself doing as well. So we agreed that I would train them and the staff on sales. They would train me on the property. And that was my entry level into that business as a consultant to start property sourcing.
And so tell me about those earlier deals, what kind of things you were sourcing and what sort of things you've been doing over the last few years.
So my very first deal, and when I think back to it, I think without the infrastructure of a team of, I think we had 72 people in the office.
Okay.
That kind of deal wouldn't have been possible, someone coming from grassroots up. So I found a block of 10 apartments in Liverpool, originally listed at $1 million, so roughly about 100 grand a unit, been reduced by to 950, been reduced again to 900. And we looked at the breakup value of that block, and it was around 1.2 million. So each unit was worth, let's say, 120,000. Mm-hmm. Some were a little bit more, some were a little bit less. Some came with parking, some didn't. And what we did is we approached the owner and said, look, we have investors that would be willing to buy 1 or 2 units in the block. They couldn't commit to the full block, but if we can sell the entire block for you and get you to that 950 price that you're looking for. So we went in between the 2 prices to give them an incentive to do it on our kind of agreement. Then we'd break that down into 10 units, so 95 grand a unit that you would net, and anything over and above £95,000 would be our fee per unit.
Yeah.
So on that particular deal, we made a £7,000 margin off of each unit. Right. We sold all 10 units, and then on the 10th unit, we exchanged on the freehold of the building for £1, and we back-to-back that with a fund for 36 times the annual ground rent.
So thereby for multiple of what the ground rent is.
What the ground rent was, yeah, exactly. So I think the ground rent we set at 250, so you're talking £2,500 for the annual ground rent, and then it was 36 times 2.5 grand.
Yeah, because you're breaking up the property and creating the individual leases, you can determine what the ground rent, service charges, things are at that
exactly.
point.
Yeah,
it gives you a lot of control in terms of what that end product's going to look like.
Yeah, and we would just look at 10-year RPI linked leases, 125 years, sometimes 250 years, depending on the block.
Yeah.
And then we'd also look at the block and see if there was anything else that we could title split. So if there were parking spaces that we could sell on as an add-on, if there were garages on the property that we could break off, if there was a piece of land that we thought we could take that land and we could bank that for £1 and sit there until someone approaches us. So there were all these weird and wonderful ways, and that was my entry level. And it was an interesting way of starting out, but it was a great way of starting out as well.
Going straight into the deep end, kind of complex deals like that. Most people will not start off with things like that. Yeah, great. And those complex deals, I say, is where the big money is, because most people are either fearful of them or don't understand how to do them. Mm-hmm. And that leaves very few that actually can do them and will do very well out of them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would look at that block and say, right, well, that's worth 1.2 million. We can secure that for 950,000. We could sell that on to an investor for a 2% sourcing fee. And they wouldn't think that you could make a fee off of each individual unit. Yeah. They wouldn't think that you could get the freehold for £1 and be able to sell that on, or you could even retain that and be the freeholder and take £2,500. I mean, like, return on investment for a £1 investment to make 2.5 grand a year is phenomenal. So there's all these ways, but you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. And so your role in that, would it be the selling the deals on to the investors, the individual investors, finding them, or they already had the investors, you would talk to them and offer the deals? Or
yeah, so this is kind of how I try to do my training as well, is that it's if I look at a sourcing business, there's 3 hats. You've got sourcing, selling, sales progression. And they're all 3 completely different hats in the business, because the message that you put out on the sourcing channel to get landlords and vendors is completely different to the message that you have to put out on your socials to attract investors.
Different audiences.
Exactly. And then the level of work, attention and time that goes into them progressing that sale from, yes, I'm happy to take that property, all the way through to exchange completion is immense. So I don't believe that one person can effectively run a sourcing business and do a serious amount of numbers by just being that individual. So the great thing about my entry level was that business was already set up. So as I said, there was 70 people in the office. There was a whole sales progression team. There was a whole sales team. There was a sourcing team. There was a development team. There was all these different teams. There was a team that dealt with the freeholds and brokering them on. There was even lettings and mortgage brokers in the office. So we would be given a criteria that would be location, yield, price point, and we would go out and we would find stock for the database that the guys already had. So my job would solely be focused on one thing, and I'd be laser focused on just find property. And at the point of me agreeing that sale, it was like a conveyor belt. So that would get passed to the sales team, and that would be the last I would see of that deal unless something was going wrong and I needed to be the person that spoke with the owner. But outside of that, I was purely sourcing property, and I liked it that way because I didn't really want to be investor facing. And again, that's what put me off of wanting to be an estate agent, is dealing with buyers.
And they're almost like different skills as well. There's some overlap in the skills. So whether you're looking for an investor, whether you're looking for someone to sell your property, you're still selling in a way, but the skill set is different. And so most people don't comfortably wear all 3 of those hats.
No. And I think people's interest as well, like for me, I like the excitement and creativity of looking at deals from multiple different ways and saying, this is a flip, this is an assisted sale, this isn't a deal, this deal could be structured this way and we need it at this price. But then if you're looking at an investor, that work's already done. So if you're selling that property, you can only sell it one way to that person. And then if we look at the sales progression hat, that's somebody who's has a keen eye for like attention to detail, understands the legal process, has great problem solving skills, great time management skills, is proactive and not reactive to the negative situations that always come up, is great at building relationships and keeping solicitors on side, mortgage brokers, lenders, everyone involved in that. So I really do believe that you might be able to wear 2 hats. I just don't think you can wear 3.
I think they are completely different skills that are required. So the sales progressor, as you said, there's so many different people involved in that transaction. There'll be the seller, their solicitor, the broker in the middle that is sourcing the deal on the buyer side. You've got the buyer, their solicitor, the mortgage broker, the valuer, etc. There's so many different.
We worked out the average deal has a minimum of 12 because it's even down to like the council for the searches, and then there might be a search company for flood risk and everything like that, and there could be 3 solicitors because of independent legal advice. Like, there's so many moving parts and so many third parties to where the deal could go wrong. And I think that's why estate agencies have such a high fall through rate, because it's not seen as an important part. They're targeted on instructions and exchanges, and they don't understand the kind of, the timeline and the different milestones that you need to be ticking to get to exchange. So I think everyone should learn sales progression, even if it's not the hat you want to wear.
Understand.
I think you should understand it and go through that process once or twice yourself. If that's you buying a house, or if that's you progressing that first deal or working alongside someone who's doing it, because until you understand that process, you can't really manage someone in your team to do that and make sure they're doing exactly what they should be doing.
And so how long were you involved in that business?
So I was in that business for about 2 years. And I learned a lot, and I went and set up a business with one of the directors of that business, and we worked together for another 2 years, and then COVID hit.
Doing something similar or different?
So we were doing not on as big a scale, but we were doing buy-to-let sales.
Right, okay.
And then COVID hit and lockdown came, and naturally we started having different ideas. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to set up my company, Casita Properties.
Yeah.
I kind of saw a gap in the market of something that I thought was a good idea, and that was focusing the business on tenanted properties, so creating like a landlord-to-landlord platform.
Yes.
Lots of people told me it was a bad idea. Nobody wants to buy people's properties that already have tenants in and inherit their problems. But that's an assumption that that tenant is a problem. Yes. There are plenty of good tenants out there. And how I saw it was, if you wanted to start a business, what would be the lowest risk way of doing it? Would it be go to a high street, pay a load of money for a lease on a property, not have a client book, not know if it would work, or approach someone who has a business that's looking to exit, have 5 years worth of accounts, be able to go into the business and experience it on a day-to-day running, meet the staff, see who you like, who you don't, look at the client book, and know that you can go in there and have income being produced from day one. And that's how I kind of looked at tenanted properties. I don't have to take every property on, but I can go in there and look at the property and say, I don't like how this person's living, so we wouldn't want our clients to inherit a problem. Or these look great, and they've replaced the carpets themselves, they've decorated it nicely, they maintain the garden, been there for 2 years, I met the kids, like things like that. And building that profile then makes it easier to sell that opportunity on to an investor.
Yeah.
So it worked really well, and the fact it was income producing from day one helped.
I think it's really interesting you look at it as a business, and I've never heard it being described in that way before, but you're absolutely right. You're going in, you're looking at the clients, you're looking at the history, you're looking at the accounts, and then at that point you can make a decision whether it's an interesting proposition to take on. And there's many times where we've been looking at properties to acquire where the landlords had it for 20, 30 years, they've made their money from it, but it's now come back to that dilapidated state that they originally acquired it in because they've just neglected it.
And they want full market value.
And they want full market value, but then you think, actually, there's now another 20 years that can be run from that particular property in terms of whatever it is we're gonna do with it. And what sort of vetting process would you look at when you're looking at a potential buy-to-let to take on to offer to a client?
So first thing we'll be looking at is the rent, current market rent. And the reason we're doing that first is because we want the highest return on investment and yield for our investors. But more importantly, it's the impact that it's now having on mortgages. So mortgages on a buy-to-let basis on properties right now are based on affordability as opposed to bricks and mortar value.
That's the rent covering the mortgage.
Exactly, yeah. So £50 a month short has a massive impact and could be the difference between 75% loan to value and having to have 65% loan to value, because it impacts the amount of money that the bank is willing to lend on that property. So we would always go in and we would want to make sure that it's had a rental increase. And if it hasn't, we would make that a condition that before we start selling it, they would have to increase the rent to the market value. And the reason, and the reason I would do it before we started selling it is, one, I didn't want to waste my time, and two, if it was going to be a problem with the tenant, I didn't want it to become a problem of my client.
Yeah.
So I'm all about fire prevention rather than putting the fire out when it happens. So if it's going to be a problem, let's deal with it at the start. Let's see if we can, like, for instance, sometimes when they'd say we can't afford £100 in one hit, cool, £50 for 6 months. We agree with our buyer that they're happy for it to be £50, and then in 6 months' time, then there's an agreement that we can increase it by 50 again.
Yeah.
So it's that compromise. But if we can't get to that compromise, then we just move on to the next deal.
Yeah. And in terms of the client, the buyer who's purchasing that property, what is it that you think they're looking for in terms of out of that deal? What's important for them, do you think?
So, like I said to you about different hats, so the selling hat is not one that I like. So what I did is I spent 6 months working out how best to sell these deals. And I met a financial advisor at an event. It's a non-property related event. And we were just discussing what we both did. And he said he has lots of investors that would be interested in investing into property, but they just don't have the knowledge, the time. They'd be fearful that they might invest in the wrong thing. And we decided to meet up and agree to maybe just trial 1 or 2 properties with his database. And what I really liked is that his clients have to pay him £4,000 for a financial review, so like a health check. So if they're invested into that already, they will take his advice.
Yeah.
So he would say, right, they've got £400,000 there. We're advising them to put 100 to 150 into property and then the rest into other areas, which was great because then it wasn't too biased. And then we would say, well, 150 grand will get you 2 properties over a certain price point or 3 properties within a certain price point. And we basically created this one product fits all model, which was 7% gross yield. Property has to be turnkey, no works needed, ideally tenanted, so it's income producing from day one, and in an area that has future regeneration. So it hasn't had the regeneration now, but there are plans over the next 5 to 10 years. So these are what I would class as retail investors and not property investors. And that really excited me because every property investor that I met at an event had really unrealistic expectations of yield, discount, return on investment, the product that they wanted. They were absolute unicorn deals. So we trialed that, and in the first month we sold 5 properties through them.
Okay.
And we then kind of looked at it and said, okay, can we scale this up? So what we did is we essentially made them the selling arm of the business. Okay. We were the sourcing arm, and every month we would get what we called the shopping list. And I would say we've onboarded 5 investors this month. Altogether there is scope for 12 properties. And then we would go out and we would find 12 properties. And then that led to us expanding the business, having an office in London, having an office in Warrington, looking at one in the Northeast, having one in Lincolnshire, and building the team to 14 people at that time, and really just going for it.
And in terms of, I think, first of all, I think it's a really smart move working with a financial advisor. And it's great you found someone that's open-minded. Most of them don't like properties for some strange reason. Maybe because the commissions aren't there for them. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit cynical.
They were paid healthy out of this. Yeah.
Generally, when they're selling, they tend not to like property. But it's great you found somebody that was open-minded. And I think with investments, even investors, they fall into different categories as well. So you'll have an investor that is what I'd call like the retail investor, who's more passive. Yeah. Really, it's just, where do I park my cash for a reasonable, healthy return in a great asset that maybe will do well over time? That kind of mindset. And that's, I think, the easiest to fulfill and deliver because there's less things to go wrong. Because
it's a lower expectation.
Safe asset. There's nothing too funky or fancy going on in that deal. The chances of things going wrong are very, very slim. And if they do, you can generally rectify them. There's not going to be no major financial catastrophe in that situation. So you've got a nice model working where you think, okay, vanilla buy-to-lets that are already tenanted, ready to go, turnkey to this group of investors. And in terms of then going out and finding those properties, were you focusing on just landlords, or you'd find standard vacant property, then get them tenanted and package them up, or what's the approach?
So it would be various ways. So platform-wise, we would be looking on Rightmove, Zoopla, on the market, those platforms. But then social media played a massive part. So LinkedIn became our biggest lead generator.
Right.
And I would say we probably won 80% of our instructions from LinkedIn.
Wow.
So it was a really, really vital tool. And I think it's because nobody else was doing it at the time. We train people now to do it, but at the time, nobody else was thinking that way. So we would get inbound leads constantly coming in from the message we were putting out on our posts. And I think because people are on there for work-related topics, they were like accidental leads that were coming in because they weren't expecting to see it, but they were at work and the message would be like, I don't know, are you fed up of endless viewings, or are you tired of your deals falling through and stuff like that? And they'd just catch them off guard. Yeah. And then they would be like, well, actually, I am trying to sell a property at the moment. And they'd contact us and then we'd win the instruction off of the agent.
Right.
But even if we won the instruction off of the agent, we would always want to get in contact with the agent to tell them what we were doing, because showing that agent what we were capable of and building that relationship would then mean that we had a foot in the door with them to get more deals, because there is obviously a stigma attached to property sources and estate agents. Estate agents have a negative kind of view on property sources because there are so many people doing it badly.
Yeah.
And we started off only working with independent estate agents because it was easier to kind of know if it was John Smith Property Services, we could find John Smith and speak to John Smith. But then we started doing deals with Hunters and Pattinsons and getting in with the right people, and it made it so much easier. But yeah, we would do it across all of them, and we would initially just take on tenanted properties. But then we saw there were so many properties that were no chain properties. So we thought, you know what, we could still line up someone to move in within a month, and we would just maybe offer an incentive that we would cover the rent until we got a tenant in there. Okay. So it was minimal, maybe £500, but our margins were high. And then we got approached to do one where somebody was buying a property and the chain on their side fell through, and they were being threatened that if they didn't secure another buyer, that the chain above would fall through. So they approached us and said, we've got 2 weeks to find a buyer. Can you help us? We're willing to let the price go down to this. Mm-hmm. That was enough of an incentive for us to have a good commission and still have a discount for our investors. And then that led us to think, you know what, we could probably include homeowner-occupied chain sales as well. Right. So it was like an evolution of started off just tenanted, but then we realised there were other products that we could work on.
So it's a solid principle to start with and just kind of evolved over time. So I want to come back to social media and the power of social media and the impact that that's had. But let's talk about some of the challenges sources have, or some of the mistakes you think sources make. And as we touched on, we were talking about off camera.
Yeah.
So many sources just do a bad job and have a bad reputation. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes you see sources making?
Probably choosing the wrong trainer to start with. But I think a lot of them think it's a lot easier than it is because it's made out to be a lot easier on YouTube. So they educate themselves on free information, but the free information typically is a hook to get them in the room for the more expensive training. And like we spoke off air, it's not just property knowledge that you need to be successful in this. You need sales and objection handling and how to negotiate deals. You need training on social media, because how else is anyone going to know who you are, what you do, how they can work with you, unless you've got a 30 grand ad spend every month. So social media for me is like the first thing that most people should start, because you want to start building that presence before you go out and look for investors and potential landlords. So I think firstly, their expectation of how quickly they can find a deal and that you can just go on the course and the next day go out and sign up a deal is wrong. I think they don't have their processes set up correctly. So when an investor comes in, what does that journey look like? What is the expectation of that investor? Do they think now that you've onboarded them that you're going to find a property straight away? I think a lot of them don't understand sales progression, like I said. So they take an upfront fee. The deal doesn't go through. It falls apart during the legals due to it taking too long, people not being proactive. And then they're left in a sticky situation where they have to pay a fee back that 9 times out of 10 they've spent already. There's so many things that property sources do wrong, and just with small tweaks can be made right. But I think there's lots of educators out there that always leave students needing them and needing more, so they never quite get taught everything. So some of it's their fault, some of it's the way they've been taught, some of it's their expectations, their background. Not everybody is going to be successful, even with the best training. I have lots of people that I train and they're just not action takers. And they jump from your course to my course to someone else's course, and they're still not compliant. I have people that I've been speaking to for 2 years now. They still say, I'm still sorting out my compliance. It's not hard. It really isn't. You can just, we've even created a guide for it.
Detail rather than the thing that's going to move them towards the result. It's finding the deal, getting that negotiated, getting that secured. That's going to be the thing that they're focused be on, and priority, rather than spending a time on the other bits on the side, like spending months on compliance and stuff.
I think this is what I find with most of the people that I onboard. One of the biggest problems is that they haven't really got that vision of who they are and what their business is. So what do you want to be known for? Like I said about my business, I want to be known as the tenanted buy-to-let specialist. And that's the only message I put out there.
Yeah.
So that message will be good for the investors to come to me, but also be good for the landlords and the sellers to come to me, and also estate agents. But what I see is one day you're looking for land in Manchester, and then the next day you're looking for a BRR in Birmingham, and then you're looking for a lease option or a lease extension in London. And it's very hard for people to take you seriously when you don't even take yourself seriously, and start speaking to estate agents and constantly your criteria on their system is changing. They don't take you seriously either. So I think people really need to sit down and think, what is my skill set?
Yeah.
I'm working in a clothing shop right now. I wouldn't suggest that they go and start sourcing BRR.
Yes.
They have no knowledge on pricing jobs up or what to actually look out for. But if you have a trade, you're an electrician, you're a carpenter, then you're going to have the right people around you, and it would be easier for you to maybe start sourcing that kind of product.
Yeah.
So I think people need to sit back and just work out what their skill set is, and then also work out, this is a strategy that I want to do. Like I said to you about where I live, my strategy doesn't work for where I live. So what's convenient for me, which is sourcing on my doorstep, isn't what's in demand with investors. So they have to evaluate, I want to do this strategy. Does it work in my area? No. Okay, so either I change the strategy in my area, or I change the area so that I can do this strategy. Yes. So that's what I think as well.
I guess when someone's starting, I think one of the things I think is important for people to work out with whether they're going to be strategy specific or location specific. So, for example, it might be, as you said, you pick one strategy that you maybe have some understanding of. It could be HMOs, for example. So, right, that's the thing I want to do. I want to do HMOs. I want to find HMOs and I want to source them and I'm going to sell them on. Or it might be that actually I'm area specific, like us, Birmingham. If someone's a motivated seller, we don't really mind what that is. We'll look at different ways to turn that into a deal as long as we can monetize it somewhere. As long as we see there's some profit in the deal, we don't really mind what that is. But that requires a more broader skill set. But then you are focused on a specific location. So I think it is important to be known for something as to be associated with your name. So, for example, it might be discounted property in Birmingham, or it might be HMOs in Yorkshire or something like that. And I think that certainly helps. There's a clearer message for people that are seeing you, and it has just started taking it seriously as well.
Yeah, build your credibility. And we spoke about obviously branding, marketing, social media, stuff like that. I think until people decide how they're going to use that to their advantage and how they're going to build their client base and who their client base is as well. That's another problem people face, is how do you find your ideal client if you don't know who your ideal client is? Yeah. So you have to take time to build that avatar of, well, are they retired people, or are they 18 to 35, or are you in the circle of doctors and dentists? So you want to be known as the guy that helps build portfolios for people within medicine, for instance. And then once you know who that is, it makes it easier. So one thing that I've always said is, once you know your strategy, you know your location, you want to use the Daniel Priestley model, which is oversubscribed.
Yeah.
So only onboard investors. So most people want 2,000 people on their investor database, but they have no idea who that person is, what they're looking for. Whereas like the financial advisor, they take time. They might only have 10 active people on the database, but they've taken the time to understand that person, what their motivation is, what their criteria is. And we say, okay, well, this is the product we offer. Is that something you're interested in? Yes. So we know there's 10 people there. So we go out and we find a property, but that's only one property. So it's oversubscribed, because if all 10 people want that product, only one person can take it. Yeah. And what that does is it allows you to help condition those investors as well at the speed you want them to move. So if I offered you that property on Thursday and you said, great property, Paul, give me the weekend to think about it. If you come back to me Monday and said, got 2 questions, other than that, I'm happy. And I said, really sorry, they went on Friday. You're going to have that FOMO moment.
Yes.
And what that will do is that will condition you so that when I get the next property, there's no room to take the weekend to think about it. You have to action it. So I learned that from, I did a 2-day training course with Jordan Belfort, and it was all about straight line persuasion. And he used to talk about, even if you haven't sold that product, if the person's taking too long, tell them that you've sold the product.
Yeah.
And then come back to them in a few days. Say it's fallen through. I'm not saying lie to people, but you have to condition those investors from day one as to the speed and the attentiveness that you want them to kind of perform at.
Yes.
Otherwise, you'll be the person that has to kind of climatize to their way of doing it. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a lot slower than you need it to be.
And most people do it the other way around. As you said, we try and fit into other people's needs rather than understanding what they want and actually finding the right people that will work the way we want.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to understand people and people's personalities and how they work. And you can't do that with 2,000 people on a database. You can do that with a small number of people. And there'll be people in that group that will be really fast decision makers. Paul, we love it. It sounds fantastic. How do we move forward? And there'll be those that will think, well, actually, you know what? I need to put it through my spreadsheet. I need to think about it and speak to the wife. I need to meditate on it. And then I'll come back to you in a few days' time with a few more questions. And they're the kind of two extremes, if you like. And then there'll be people in between. And you'll start working out who is easier to work with or how to present your information to the person that you're selling deals to. So when I first started, it took a few years to kind of learn some of this stuff. But what I started doing is I'd have a small group of buyers that I'd be selling deals to. But then when I sent them the information, people say, send them your deal pack. I wouldn't have a standard deal pack. I'd send them the information in the way that I think they want to see it, rather than here's the generic information, take from it what you want. And that way it was more impactful for them because I knew this person was more detailed. They wanted this numbers. This person just wanted a high level overview, and then trying to send it to them in that way. And I found that worked really well, but it takes time.
Yeah.
But the rewards are much, much bigger.
Yeah. And I actually do a free webinar called Property Sourcing Kickstart every week. And one of the things that people were really surprised at in this free webinar is my interpretation of how you should package and offer a deal out.
Yeah.
And I always tell them that less is more, because whatever isn't in that pack will prompt them to ask a question, and that's usually a buying question, and then that starts that interaction. If you give them everything in the pack, then they'll make their own decision based on that information. If everything isn't in there, then it leads for them to contact you. But I also tell people to only put factual information in there as well. So if we're talking about GDVs, estimated rents, even like working out return on investment, I don't believe you can work out anybody's return on investment.
Yeah.
It's personal. So I always tell my students to create a return on investment calculator in Excel, brand it, so it's got all your branding on, it's evergreen, they can use it for other deals, but they're reminded of you all the time. But just send them that return on investment calculator with the factual information. So purchase price, 100 grand, current rent, £700. If there's any service charge, ground rent, anything like that. Yes. Outside of that, if it's expected refurbishment costs, stuff like that, get the quotes from 2-3 builders, get the valuations for the estimated GDV from 2 or 3 estate agents, and the same with letting agents, and provide it to them. And if we're talking it's 50, 60 and 70 grand for the quotes, well, then they can decide if they're going to be pessimistic, realistic or optimistic, and they physically put that into the calculator. We also assume that we can just put a ballpark figure for legals, for mortgage fees. We're assuming that everyone's going to be 70% loan to value, but you might have a great broker and you might have a great product, so you can get 80%, but I might have really bad credit and I'm high risk, so I'm having to put 40% into the deal. There's all these different factors. Mortgage arrangement fees, you might get a 0. I might have to pay 2.5-3 grand for my mortgage arrangement, and that all impacts return on investment. And I always say, if you advertise a return on investment on your deal pack, I might be overselling it to me with bad credit, so I'm expecting to get 15% return on investment, but in reality I'm sitting at 8. But then it might work out for you to get 20%, and that might be your benchmark. And you look at that and say, well, 15's too low for me, and you discount that deal. So it's something that I think you need to be clever with. It needs to be tailored to the person. Factual information will be what's going on in the area, sell the area hard, and I usually sell the area before the property. Provide any factual pictures, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But outside of that, tailor it. So if we've had a conversation and I know you're interested in capital growth, then I'll tailor my email with the information on what's going on in the area. If I know you're focused on cash flow, then I'll factor that and what the agents are saying that the rent increase should be and things like that. Or if we think you can refurb it to get a higher price, then we'll include that. But the main thing is it has to be, like you said, tailored to that person. And you're only going to have that if you're having a conversation with those people and not just sending a blanket MailChimp email out to 2,000 people.
Yeah. I think sometimes people think the biggest audience that will see the message will increase the chance of selling. But I'm with you, a smaller, more receptive audience that you understand well is going to be much better for you. And selling great deals is not difficult. Selling £20 notes for £10, you can do all day long.
Well, the bigger the database,
just presenting in the right way.
The bigger the database as well, the more chance there is of things going to junk as well. When you're sending individual tailored emails out to 10 people, you've got a higher rate of them hitting the inbox. Yes. When you're sending out mass emails to people, 9 times out of 10 they are going to the junk box now. So even though you've got a big database, it's probably only like 5 or 6% of people
deliverability is very low.
Opening that. So it's a lot of work for small reward.
Yeah. So let's talk about some branding and the utilizing of branding on social media and the importance of that.
So I think branding is really important. As you can see, I'm wearing one of my businesses branding now. If people see it enough times, it leads them to ask questions because you're constantly wearing it. And I think it has to have a clear message. I take it back to training. Whenever we're starting with a new mentee and we're asking them to choose a name for their business, we always ask them to ensure that it's something that they can see in 10 years' time being on a billboard or on the side of a bus. Is it something that you can see, as opposed to going with John Smith Property Services Consultancy, and also looking at your logo, looking at everything like that. I had a really shocking logo when I started out, and I paid £10,000 to have a rebrand for my business. Mm-hmm. And people say it's a lot of money, but you know what? The education that I got from the company that did it as to why they use this font, what it means, what the colours meant and what it represents, and the upfront questions about the feel that I wanted it to have and my website, that education is now put into my academy. So my return on investment is tenfold now from that. But then I've used it for all my other businesses as well. So understanding the impact of certain fonts and colours and stuff like that to represent your message is massive. I think brand everything. Brand it, pens, my laptop case, my jumpers. We've got a clothing line coming out for peak performance in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be just casual wear, but also sport wear as well for the gyms. The more we get that brand out there, the higher value that company is going to be.
And it causes you to be consistent with what you're doing as well, because it's the same brand constantly that's going out there that's being seen. And so how about having more than one brand? So that's something that you do as well.
So it's really tough running a personal brand that has 4 or 5 different brands attached to it, because obviously your audience is different and your message is different. I'm quite lucky that my businesses all kind of complement each other because they're entrepreneurship, business, property, mentoring. But if I could see that if you had completely opposite businesses, like you're a property investor by day, but you ran a chiropractor clinic at night, it would be quite contrasting and your audiences would be different. So I think being clever with it and maybe making sure that you separate it if it's too different is really important. When I do LinkedIn training, LinkedIn success is all about the optimization of your profile. And the way you optimize it will then dictate the people that see your profile. So if my day job is a chiropractor, but I want to go into property and find investors, I'm not going to be able to do that on that current profile. So you either start again, or you just have to use a different profile.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that your message and your branding has to be consistent. So we use Canva. Canva's great. It's got so much functionality. But the great thing about Canva is that you can create a brand kit. So your colors are on there, your fonts are on there, the different styles of logo, whether it's transparent, maybe it's white, maybe it's red on black or black on red, whatever it is, it's all on there. So when you're creating your posts and everything, it's consistent because it applies your branding, your colors, your fonts to it. I think when people are constantly changing the look of the business, it can be really confusing. And I think that message shows chaos, and that probably reflects the chaos that's in the service that you probably provide to people as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing how many shocking branding and logos that you see, and it's really a reflection then on that individual about how they think of work as well.
Yeah, it doesn't have to cost you a lot anyway. Like I spent a lot of money, but I was getting my website done and I was interested to learn about. Like I have a big interest in marketing and social media and branding, so that was almost like going on a course for me.
Yeah.
But you've got like Fiverr now that are freelance workers, and you can pay someone overseas to create you 10 different options of a logo for £30.
Yeah.
Like it's a really small investment, but if you think about the return on investment of a good recognizable logo that people will know, and not just a stock symbol that you're getting off a Canva, it's huge. It makes such a difference. It really does.
You mentioned LinkedIn a couple of times. Is that your preferred social media platform for this business, or do you think other platforms work as well, or just as well? Or
so it's like what we said about investors, about everyone. You need to understand the criteria of an investor, the same way you need to understand the criteria of a platform. So like we know people are going on TikTok for entertainment value, right? There is education on there, but most people are on there because they've got half an hour to an hour to waste just scrolling through stuff until they find something they like. You've got Facebook. People typically are on Facebook because there's communities, there's groups on there. So your information's going to be tailored to those communities and groups. Then you've got Instagram. Instagram's kind of like that middle one. It's entertainment, but it's community. I don't get a huge amount off of that. But then if I look at who I'm looking for professional people. Well, LinkedIn is a professional platform full of professional people carrying out professional tasks every day. So the algorithm on there works 1,000 times better than any other platform because of the way you optimize your profile. So if I'm looking for landlords in Manchester, it has the functionality of searching for landlords and then changing location settings for Manchester. And then it's like the yellow pages of investors for me. And then I can just outbound and target that. So there's a huge amount of value on LinkedIn. And I've got 28,000 followers. You might only have 1,000. But if you're creating compelling enough content for me to engage with, you then get exposed to my followers because I've engaged with yours. So it's all about your followers as well. So there's huge benefits of LinkedIn.
Algorithm work very differently from the other platforms on LinkedIn.
I think because it's not social media, it is a business platform. It works differently because people aren't monetizing on there. There isn't a creator fund like there is on Instagram and TikTok, for instance. It is still very much a business platform. So I think the algorithm still works for you. But the main thing is you just have to make sure that your call to actions and your hooks are solid on LinkedIn to get that engagement, get those likes, get those comments. Yeah. And then once you have those comments, it's then about making people comment back because the more interaction you get, it pushes it longer.
More
so
people see it.
Yeah. So if I put a post out now and I get 6 comments, I'll probably respond to those comments tomorrow, which will then reignite that post.
Yeah.
But my comment will be responding to what they've just said, but then it will be a question at the end as well. And then that will encourage them to then create more. And then I'll get to the point where then I'll take it into the DMs and then we'll have a proper conversation. But that will take you from 200 impressions to 5,000 impressions.
And I think what we find on LinkedIn, that we get much better quality business on LinkedIn, and the platforms bring us, as I said, there's different audiences. So thinking about who the audience is on that platform and what message you want to share in that platform.
I put the same post out on all platforms, but just tailor the wording.
Yeah.
Just so that the language is right. So it's more professional, more formal on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's a bit more playful on Instagram. Probably the same as Instagram and Facebook, I would say, because if you post on Facebook, on Instagram, it automatically pushes it onto Facebook anyway. And then let's be honest, on TikTok, are people really reading the content that you're putting in it? No, they're just watching it. So it's just knowing what to do. And then everyone says, I don't have time to post every day. You don't have to. There's clever ways of doing it. You can schedule it. So I like to create my content Sunday evening, spend 2 hours Sunday evening, schedule it to go out all week. So maybe, it's 12 o'clock now. Maybe I've got a post that needs to go out at 12 o'clock, but I know I'm going to be on a podcast with you. I scheduled that last night. So regardless of what I'm doing, that still is consistently going out at the same time on the same day that people are used to seeing my content on.
Yes. Paul, this has been a fascinating conversation. We could spend hours and hours discussing stuff. Some of my favorite topics. We didn't even get to some of the other things I want to talk about, like assisted sales and things like that, and some of your events. So maybe this might be an opportunity for a part 2 at some point.
Sounds good.
As well. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Paul Stapleton across all platforms. LinkedIn's probably the best platform to get me on.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
Thanks a lot.
Much
Cheers.
appreciated. Thank you.